Yum, yum!
Greg here from Pixel Fondue. Recently I had to come up with some sort of transition to bring a 3D object on screen, and so I came up with this voxely sort of method here where you see these big chunky blocks res down into these ordered sort of grid-like pattern of little blocks, little voxels on our ATST walker here, animated in MODO. So how did I do that? Well, that's what this tutorial is about. I've got a couple of Photoshop images here just so you can see it again. You'll notice that, they're pretty ordered, right? It's not a surface particle generator where it just randomly scatters cubes on a surface. They're really nicely ordered on here. And, I used, I think this one's 8K, so you can really zoom in. I did, just offset them a little bit in the Replicator to make it a little bit randomized and randomize the color just a tad. These are rendered in Octane, by the way. But in general, it's a pretty ordered grid of these little tiny cubes. Here's his foot. I didn't realize I had these little toes on them, those little AT-ATs, or ATSTs, as they are called. I should actually shout out to the creator of this particular model. I got this on GrabCAD by, it's right here is the file, Marcus Nienen. That is a lot of I's and N's and an E. But nice model, Marcus. I believe this is I think it's a 3DM, which is Rhino and an STP. So if you don't have the CAD loader, you'll have to translate that some other way. But anyway, this is where I got the model. Here I am in MODO 12.2 with my ATST. You can, of course, use whatever model you want. I suggest the Hippo from Assets. That's a favorite of mine. But you can also download this guy if you want. Now I did put a little walk cycle on here. It's more of a run cycle really. I just sort of created a hierarchy, and you can see some locators on there. That's all it is, all it's doing. I only spent a couple hours on this, and it's really not that great, but the point is I want to show you can do this effect on an animated item, right? So you can have a static item, which is fine, but it's a little bit cooler when you have something that's animated and it just kind of reses into existence there. Pretty sweet. So we've got that going. Go back to frame 1, and the first thing I'm going to do to get this effect going is I'm going to add a new mesh item and call this ATST merged. And as you can guess, when we pop open my stack here, I'm going to add a merge mesh, and I'm going to add sources and make sure we're in existing, so we see everything in the scene here. And I'm just going to kind of grab all these guys right there, just shift click, get all the meshes and add that to add source, and now they're all in there. And you'll see if I hide my animated guys here, I just have this one item, so now I just have this entire hierarchy. It's dozens of items just merged down into one item, and it's still animated though. If I jump ahead a frame, you'll see it switch. Now it's not, I can't just scrub through it at 60 frames per second anymore because it's a lot of things being merged and evaluated, but it's not that slow, and it's animated, so that's pretty cool. So now I have it all baked down into one mesh, and in order to get those particles, you might think like, okay, just use a surface particle generator, but that's not what we're going to do. If you use a surface particle generator, those are really nice for creating sort of random particles on it. Something you can kind of see these random particles here, but we don't want random particles. We want nice ordered particles, kind of like a grid. And these have been offset a little bit in the Replicator just to make it a little more natural. But we do want a sort of a grid-like look and not a really random look, right? Something like this. And so we are going to do something a little bit different than the surface particle generator. I'm actually going to pop open my schematic and add my ATST merge down there. And then I'm going to add a VDB voxel item. So this is a voxel item that can accept a mesh as a source. And then you'll see this popping up in the viewport here, this sort of cube array around the mesh there, and that is the voxel, right? And so it's a very low-res voxel grid to start off with, but over here on voxel resolution, I can up the fineness of this grid, right? So I can hit 8, and all those guys subdivide, and we're looking a little more like my ATST, and go up to 16. And I can do generate voxel mesh, so you can kind of see what's going on here. And I can hide my merged ATST, and you can see this sort of lumpy Voxel Mesh sort of taking shape right there. Pretty cool. In fact, I can bump this up again to 32. And you can see that I've got this, array of just ordered points, really. It's a grid of points. If you sort of forget about the actual mesh there for a second, you're really looking at this nice grid of points. And that's what we're going to be using for a replicator. So for the prototype, for the little blue cube, I'll just add a blue cube prototype to the scene. So press N for a new mesh and call that cube proto or something like that. And then add an operator and just do cube. Now, the reason I'm using a mesh operator instead of just doing a standard mesh is, I have the flexibility to change this at any time, but you can also change primitives in a mesh operator anytime you want to as well. Like I just go like, cone, and now my cube is a cube and a cone. You got multiple primitives in one thing, but I could turn off the cube and now I have a cone. It's interesting how MODO does this, where the primitive is an operator on an empty mesh item rather than there being a sort of primitive item. It's pretty flexible, being able to change out your mesh item to whatever primitive you want. In this case, we do want a cube though, not a cone, so I will delete Mr. Cone, mesh op, and I need to make this guy a little smaller, the cube that is, so we'll take a look at the cube mesh op and maybe 0.05 or so, something like that. That's about right. That'll look good. And we can do just a material tag here as well and call it, cube underscore proto or something along those lines. That's got a 0 there. Okay, so we've got our prototype, we've got our voxelized mesh, and now I need a replicator, right? Got a replicator, pull that into my schematic. You know the drill. Pull in your cube proto, hook that up. Hook up your VD voxel, and what? Not working, right? So it'll work as a prototype, but it will not work as a particle source. So we need to do one more step in here. We need to do another empty mesh. So get an empty mesh item, and we'll call this Voxel Merged. And what's cool is our merge mesh, at least in MODO 12.2, will actually accept voxel items. So I can look in here, I can say add source, and ATST, not ATST merged. I actually want my VDB. Can I search here? VD? Oh, I can. Look at that existing VDB voxel. That's what I want. That's what I want. So I got him. And then I'm going to hide my ATST merge. I was already hidden. So I got my voxel merge here, and that's what that looks like. And I can drag him into here and pop him in there. And now my cubes are all over my voxel merge, which I can also hide, and hide my VDB voxel. And all I'm looking at here is my replicator. And so let's go to this little guy here and say all. Now my replicators are going to be showing in the viewport, or my prototype replicator will be showing in the viewport. Let me just deselect this so you can see it better. And yeah, here he is. Little tiny cubes. And you'll notice the orientation is sort of goofy, right? They're not aligned the way you would want them to be, or at least I would want them to be. They're aligned to actually the polygons. And so in my replicator here, I want to go over here and say source mode align to surface. I want to change to point data. And that'll make them nice and ordered and grid-like, like so. Now my cube prototype is a little big. It's overlapping quite a bit. So I want to have just a little bit of a gap in between each one. So I need to shrink that guy down just a tad. So get to my cube mesh op, and I'll try like maybe 15 millimeters or so. Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. Nice little gap there between those, and it's looking pretty good. If I go ahead and I'll just go ahead and pop up a little render window. And this is essentially the finished state of the model. So this is after it has completely rezzed down to maximum resolution, the maximum number of vertices in our particle source, and the smallest cube in the prototype. What's interesting here is like all these little replicators work faster with ray tracing than they do OpenGL. It's actually faster to navigate in a preview than it is generally in the viewport with this many of them going. In fact, I don't think I need them in here anymore. I'll turn those off. But you can see it here. This is what it looks like. So this is sort of our finished state of the walker, which looks pretty good. But we need to get to the starting state, right? This guy, all blocky, fewer vertices for the particle source and much larger cube for the prototype. And then we need to animate in between them. So let me get rid of this guy, and I'm going to hide my prototypes there, my replicator, just a little bit faster feedback. And our cube proto is going to animate from big to small. So let's just say, let's just do it from frame 10 to 150. How about that? So on frame 150, whoops, not 50, 150. I'm going to animate, I'm going to just key these right here, the size, press S. That's where we want this to end. And on frame 10, I'm going to want these to be about 10 times bigger, so 0.15, like that. So now our cube is going to be animated. You can see it sort of blowing up here. Let me just push in, get a better look at this. And the scene's chugging quite a bit right now because I have tons of vertices, but that's going to change soon enough. And the way we're going to get fewer vertices is we're not going to animate the voxel resolution. Here we're at 32. I want to have it actually be finer than that, a little bit random as well. So just animating the resolution is going to give it just a really regimented, you could give it a shot, but it's going to give a really regimented look where it's just going to, I think, square each time in terms of the number of vertices. I'm going to add a Vertex Merge mesh op instead to the voxel merged item. So I'm going to take this item that we're using as the particle source, it's the merged voxel, into a mesh, and I'm going to add a vertex merge or merge vertex merge mesh op to it. And at frame 150, well, I'll just go ahead and set a distance of 1 millimeter here. We'll just key that for now. We're going to go back and change that in a second. And at 150, I think all the vertices are farther away than 1 millimeter as it is, but I'll just go ahead and key that again. So this is our smallest point, and this is where nothing's really changing. This is our final position. And then going back to that first key, instead of 1 millimeter, let's change it to, say, 0.5. So that should really merge quite a bit. Let me push out here. You see what's happened here is it's merged a ton of those vertices. And a couple of things. One, our prototype's not quite big enough, at least not for what I had in this After Effects animation. They're quite a bit bigger there. And you may want them even bigger so it's not recognizable at all before it rezzes in. So I'm going to actually make the cube proto cube size quite a bit bigger here, maybe 0.3, and probably bigger than that, let's say 0.8. Yeah, there we go, that's pretty chunky. Maybe let's just do a full on meter. All right, there we go. And I could probably merge that a little bit more. Let me just move, let's see, my cube prototype, I could probably move it out of the way here. So get out of component mode, just as an item mode, just kind of shove it down underneath the world there. So we've got quite a few cubes going on. Let me just go ahead and turn my replicators back on here. Quite a bit going on there, but I could do whatever you want. You can merge a little bit bigger radius here. So vertex merge, maybe we'll do it to 1, so there's fewer voxels there, and maybe even make the cube proto even bigger than that. Maybe we'll just call it 2. And now it's really unrecognizable, but it's going to res down over those frames, which should be give us that sort of cool looking effect. And that's basically it. You can do whatever you want with this blobbiness here. You can even add some other, if you want to make it really weird, you can add some additional operations to our particle source here. In fact, let's just do this. I'm going to move this over here. I'm going to select this, and I'm going to add a random particle random modifier, particle random modifier. There it is right there. And now that's here, and it's got a random position here. We can just do like 1 meter, and that's really sort of, let me just select all these guys and press C for channel haul. You can really randomize this position, do something like this, and keyframe that, and then at 150 turn that back to 0. So it's really going from this unrecognizable cloudy blob rezzing down all the way to our ATST. And then here, you can see it's totally this random cloud, but we got to put our randomized position offsets back to 0, and we'll get our ATST. There it is. Sweet. And it will be running the whole time. So yeah, that's basically it to get this effect right here. In fact, even more random since we put in that random particle modifier there. And rezzing down. And then you could do just like a wipe or a cross dissolve or whatever you want to get to the full on mesh. All right, have fun. Bye-bye.
Yum, yum!